listening to the 14th Source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplin.
And we are two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing the things out we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. An episode for Friday, January 5th, 2024. We made it, Andrew, and so did you, dear listeners, because, wow, what... I mean, it was just a week, so...
Yeah, I'm
glad you're here.
It's a year. It was a whole year, actually.
Indeed. The clock has turned over. The arbitrary clock has turned over, and now we are here doing our thing.
Doing it.
We thought about talking about Doctor Who.
We did. We thought we were.
We're pooped.
We're both pooped. And also, you know...
Obviously, there are things to talk about, but, like... We've been doing this long enough to the point where, like, I think the conversation will just boil down to it was good. Right?
We liked it.
We liked it. And it's only one episode, not a season or nothing. And that's not coming until the spring, the nebulous springtime. And so the best we can say, especially for those watching with Disney Plus access, just go watch it.
Yeah, just go watch it.
And enjoy it, because it is classic. I do have some thoughts about the song. I don't think it's a very good song, but...
Well, British people seem to have liked it.
Good for them. Apparently, they are at a want for good tune.
Well, and let's be clear. Murray Gold has done songs quite a bit over the years. I think there's actually like 4 or 5 songs that he's done for Doctor Who. And none of them are that great, you know?
Although... I was doing the research because I'm like, who wrote this song? And Murray Gold came back to the show to do the music for Doctor Who, starting with the David Tennant specials. But the lyrics for that song were specifically written by RTD, which proves that he is not, while a great writer, not a lyricist. I will forgive the part where the protagonist's kind of free form, if you will. That's not supposed to be good, but like there's some leaps on some rhyme and some lack of content in some of those verses where I'm just like, dude, this is first draft quality. But not that I'm a professional songwriter, so I'm going to step back and just celebrate the fact that it was a good episode.
Yeah. But we don't want to talk about it today.
No.
Mostly because, you know, we're going to say we liked it. And
we liked it.
We'll recommend just go watch it.
Indeed.
Let's go watch it.
So today we're going to talk about something that has a bit more of a divisive opinion. Not necessarily between each other, but just in general. A quote-unquote independent video game? And I'm using huge air quotes here.
Yeah, huge air quotes.
Because it became a topic of some controversy on the internet with the recent, what are they called? The Video Game Awards?
Right.
I don't know.
Whatever. The Video Game Awards. We'll just call it that.
Either way. We're here to talk about the second best fishing game of 2023, Dave the Diver.
Which, so Dave the Diver created by, it may very well be, I don't know that the team of guys who developed it is relatively small, but the thing to keep in mind,
I think it is, yes.
It was published by Nexon, which is a massive company.
Right.
It's a enormous Korean company they're responsible for Maple Story, which is like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a huge game. And really just Maple Story. That's I mean, they have other things, but that right there is huge.
And that's the thing, I think, so Dave the Diver was nominated in the Video Game Awards this last year as one of the best independent games or best indie games. And people are quick to point out, it's like, dude, this is a company, Mintrocket is the developer, owned by Nexon. Like literally flat out owned by Nexon.
Right.
But I think you make a good point. Like probably the team was relatively small. I think the biggest difference is that their cash flow is sizably different than what most indie developers have access to. Unless they got acquired by Nexon or was that one company that's been having lots of Embracer. If there's been any company that sounds like a Mass Effect villain, it's Embracer. But we're not here to talk about sort of the semantics, although I think it's actually an interesting conversation of what makes an indie game an indie game.
We're talking about it because you started playing it.
Now, you weren't talking to the listeners.
No, you,
right?
Dan.
Me, yes, indeed.
Dan, to Bethel, as they say.
Yeah, I started playing Dave the Diver, having played the first best fishing game of 2023, Dredge. I heard a lot about Dave the Diver, how it goes places, and I'd seen a bit of gameplay. I'm like, yeah, let's give this a shot. I think it was on sale. I've been playing on Switch, plays fine. And at the very least, the aesthetics and the writing style seemed fun. Mm-hmm. I think that's the place to start with, is for all the praise and the complaints, the game generally is just kind of like peak fun. It's built around just like, let's have the player do something interesting all the time, which I unfortunately can't say all games manage to do.
Right. Well, I mean, it does. I would say it's a mix. It has, there's kind of like some big picture, like what this game is, but then there's also a lot of like, oh, but also here's this little mini game. Here's this other thing. Here's this thing, like to the point where even after you've been playing for 30 hours, it's still like, hey, here's something new to do. Like, new mini game to play or a new whatever to do.
So let's put a pin in that, because we'll definitely come back to that. Can you give us a quick overview of let's just talk about like the initial introduction of the game. What is this game about? Aside from obviously Dave.
Yeah, well, it is your Dave the Diver, and your friend invites you out to the Blue Hole.
Your friend Cobra?
Your friend Cobra invites you to the Blue Hole because it's this weird hole that's full of fish from around the world.
A hole that every time you dive into it,
it changes. Yeah. And his other, Cobra has another friend, Bancho, who is basically, they want to run a sushi shop. So they're like, hey, Dave, we want you to go dive into the deep hole, the Blue Hole, and catch fish that Bancho can sell.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a sushi restaurant.
It's a restaurant, right? It's a sushi restaurant. So he can turn into fine sushi. And so the game is divided between, part of the game is swimming underwater, catching fish with your harpoon gun and other accessories. And the other, and then the end of every day, you go to Bancho Sushi and you basically sell sushi at night.
And so that's kind of the gameplay dichotomy there of like there's a swimming and catching mechanic, and then there is like burger time, not burger time, but like the other half of the game at the beginning of the game is Bancho's making sushi. Customers come to the bar and place an order, and basically between when Bancho creates the dish, you have to bring the dish to the customer before they get upset. You have to also manage the menu and make sure that you are serving things that people want. And there are even like VIP customers that come in that are requesting specific things. But that actually kind of shows or hints at the next sort of level of complexity this game drops upon you. Because that's what the game ultimately is about. I went into this game thinking it was, it's part fishing game, part restaurant management game.
Right.
And then it's divided into chapters. I believe I looked it up. I think it said the game is 7 chapters long. Partway into chapter 2, they start adding new mechanics, new systems onto everything. You're like, okay, this is getting more complicated. And then you hit chapter 3 and it just blows everything up. But pretty quickly I was like, oh, this game isn't about fishing, really, anymore. It's more about the side quests. It's more about this pushing the narrative along.
There is this narrative that really doesn't have anything to do with fishing or running a sushi shop.
Right. And I'll hold off on spoilers, I guess, but things get complicated, things get surreal, things get hilarious. I would also say, I think for all the complaints we can levy about the variety of gameplay, the sort of persistence of variety, I think the one thing the game does maintain, again, I'm not done with it yet, but so far it has maintained its tone in its sense of humor. And that's something to be praised, because I could see it easily losing that for the sake of focusing on its systems and on its different modes of play. But it's done a pretty good job of keeping the character of the game consistent as far as I've seen.
Yeah, I would agree.
So, but you have had some complaints as you've voiced to me when I've been talking to you, and I see the validity of those. I think I'm seeing the start of that in the middle of chapter 3. I'm like, okay, there's just like a lot going on, where the two main mechanics that you delineated earlier are really backseated to other things. To basically, right now it almost feels like a role playing game. A lot of they're managing relationships and doing fetch quests and all that stuff. To the point where I'm like, this isn't a fishing game. It's like I think overall, if we back the camera out all the way, it's like it's. If people would ask me what this game is, it's a management sim, where you're just managing gauges and filling gauges so that you can move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I think at the core, the primary actual game is go get fish, sell fish. That is actually really the main game loop. It's just that, like, while you're doing those two things, other things keep popping up. You know, like, oh, well, as you're selling fish or running the shop, the sushi shop, suddenly you have to start adding these other things like a farm or
You're
whatever, right?
Yeah, because I would say, yeah, I think you're right. I think the thing that the umbrella that covers everything is sort of the 3-period mechanic. You get 2 periods or 2 sort of like during the daytime and then a nighttime period, where usually you get 2 chances to fish during the day initially. And then once it hits nighttime, that's when you go do the sushi bar activity, right?
Right.
Although things get complicated.
And again, both of them have like things that pop up and make it more complicated. That's still the I think the core. It just, I think the complaint I'd have, and for those that have played it, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those that haven't, just hold on. That there are certain parts of the game where it's like, here's just a fundamentally new game that they just, it's like someone's like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did X? And like,
right.
Or not, right? Like you didn't have to insert a weird like WarioWare mini game into the middle of this, or a weird 2D kind of sneaking game. Right. Or what I can only describe as Cooking Mama. Like these are all little like mini games that pop up that sometimes feel like the Cooking Mama, which this is a mild spoiler, but at one point Bancho, the head of the sushi, starts getting challenged like Iron Chef style. Yeah. And so you not only do you have to go get ingredients, but eventually they start adding a part where you have to like, tap this button to prepare, to whatever, rotate this stick to mix the thing in the oil or whatever. And it's just it has a Cooking Mama feel. And you're like, where the hell did this come from?
And that makes no sense. I've got two much more qualified people helping him in the kitchen on the sushi side of things.
Well, it's actually Bancho doing it, but you are controlling Bancho as Cooking Mama.
Gotcha. But there's also like a visual novel.
Yeah, there's also like a weird visual novel.
It's a bizarre game. Like, how did this get made? And how did it get made? By a company with unlimited
money. It is interesting. I really, if anything, I would love to see like the NoClip or the whatever about this, because it does feel like some guys had this initial idea, and as they were working on it, people kept saying, wouldn't it be cool if? And they're like, yeah, just do it. Right. And I mean, to the point, there's a fucking Tamagotchi mini game, right? Yeah. Which is actually quite irritating in my mind, but it is like, yeah, you get an app on your phone in the game that is, you have now a virtual pet that you have to like clean its poop like it's 1997 again,
And that's the thing. Actually, speaking of NoClip, I was listening to the NoClip podcast. They have a podcast as well. A NoClip, for those that don't know, is a video game documentarians that have a Patreon, but they release all the documentaries for free on YouTube. You should check them out. They got a lot of very, very good ones, long and short, for games you probably have either played or are aware of. And whether you've played them or not, they're always really engaging. In their Game of the Year discussions, they talked about Dave the Diver. Did I just say Day of the Diver? No. Dave the Diver. And it's kind of funny because they're like, oh, Dave the Diver. I spent so much time with that. This is definitely going on our top 10 list. And then they started talking about it, and they actually started getting mad about it by the end of it for reasons that you brought up. But then even taking it a bit further, and while I'm not necessarily getting angry about it, I can see the point they're making, where they, and I talked about this when we were talking about it in our off the mic chat, which was someone kind of described it. One of the co-hosts described it as like a gotcha game without the monetization, where they're always hitting that serotonin boost, right? They're always kind of changing things, always making you feel like you're progressing without really progressing.
Right.
And although that's a bit harsh, but they're always kind of giving you new things to do, keeping you going, so that it makes it hard to put down. But without that monetization angle, it really kind of makes it almost seem in some ways a bit more sadistic, because they just want to occupy your time, which I guess is the goal of every video game. But it was kind of eye-opening, and it did allow me to approach this game from a bit more of a detached view. I guess my more metatextual level view of going like, okay, I see what they're doing here, and kind of prepared me for how things will keep changing and not get overwhelmed by it. Which for someone that was maybe more unassuming, I could see that becoming overwhelming quite a bit. Which is an interesting contrast with something like Dredge, right? Another game made by a small team, but the difference being maybe they don't have an unlimited amount of money to fund their game, but it's a much more focused game. It kind of does
the thing it does, yeah.
and in some ways more successfully, in some ways obviously less successfully, because it doesn't have that infinite influx of money. It's interesting to think of like two very successfully or very accomplished fishing games created through very different means, but kind of hitting similar, how do I want to say this, like satisfaction levels within the culture. People have been talking about Dredge, I feel like, as much, or maybe in the same conversations as they've been talking about Dave the Diver. Dave the Diver, I think, has had an edge because of its
big Nexon money.
Big Nexon money, right?
What I'll say is in comparing the two, I think they both also, both of them, like I played them both last year, and I think they were both like they're good games. They're not for everyone, but they both have their own like character, right? We talked about Dredge is like just like Lovecraft the fishing game, and it never like it pumps that pedal. It's pressing that gas pedal the whole time.
The whole time.
And whereas Dave the Diver has a much more lighthearted, but like almost, I actually said it has a certain, this is, like a cartoon anime aesthetic to it. Like one of the things I find is there are a lot of scenes, there's like little animated scenes that play like every time you upgrade your menu items and stuff. There's a lot of these just little or when you have the people come to the restaurant to eat special food. Like it's like you
research new recipes.
There's just these animated sequences which just really feel very to me they felt very anime or cartoony. I say anime, I realize that anime is Japanese and this is a Korean game, but it's that aesthetic, and I think actually some of them are even cut to look cartoony.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I would say like I think that's not unfair. I would just say like the game is really tongue in cheek. It's really cheeky, I guess, in a lot of ways. It's really self-aware and really goofy. And yeah, like honestly, a lot of those cutscenes revolve around Bancho. And you said like earlier, like Bancho is the sushi chef. I'm like, well, and to me, Bancho is the cutscene king of this game, because most of those delightful cutscenes, evocative cutscenes, and repeated cutscenes.
Well, they repeat them. What I actually find really fascinating about the Bancho cutscenes is that there are so many of them. There's like 7 or 8 of them. And every time every day you do like a research a new recipe, it picks one of them and plays it. But like there are 7 or 8 of them, which is just a fascinating to me. They put that much work into, and I can see it, right? Where someone's like, well, which one should we go with? And one guy's like, well, we have the money, just go with all of them.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. Let's not bury the lead here. Last week when we talked about our, as I ended up calling it in the show notes and in the chapter titles, 2023's Thing of the Year. That's what we did last week. I should have let you know. That's what we did last week. My Thing of the Year was talking about Indiana Jones. You talked about Dungeons and Dragons. But as we talked about in the episode before the show, you were going to talk about fishing. And I'm guessing Dave the Diver figured into that. And I'm guessing Dredge as well. If these are sort of the two main fishing games, was there any other fishing games or
No, those were the two, because when I was in California visiting with my parents, I actually I started playing Dredge. I played because Dredge had a small DLC, so I played through half of that, and then I also started playing Dave the Diver because it had not only DLC, it had the Dredge DLC. And I started playing that. So yeah, it's just the idea that I went back or essentially around Christmas time to play fishing games again. You know,
right? I think by a respectable definition, Dave the Diver is not an indie game by the the funding definition, but it does carry that kind of aesthetic and attitude of, hey, let's just collaborate with Dredge. We're two fishing games that happened this year, right? And making that happen, it kind of reminds me of, I think it was also last year when Dead Cells got Castlevania DLC. Like they actually worked with the Konami to get officially licensed Castlevania
content
levels. Just like, what? Like nobody, they don't own each other in terms of the content. Like, but they just made it happen.
Right.
There's a kind of an adorable sort of respect to just a video game. This nebulous thing called the video game community that shows that we're that they're not opponents, they're colleagues. And it's kind of cool to see that happen, even in if you're not doing, oh God, I won't say if you're not doing the research, but if you're not plugged into the discourse, Dave the Diver and Dredge seem to be on the same level. But to see sort of the truth of it and how kind of disparate they are in terms of funding and what they're able to do and the complexity of what they're able to do, but still like have that connection and make it work is heartening. I don't know. Maybe is that just me? Am I just looking for optimism where there is none?
Well, I actually, they have a video where the two of the lead designers or whatever of Dave the Diver, they'd often record when they had like big announcements, and they have the one where they announce, we're doing this Dredge DLC, and it just made sense that the two most popular fishing games, we should do a crossover, right? And it sounds like they reached out and they talked to the Dredge guys. So it wasn't just and honestly, they could have just showed up with like their big Nexon money and said, "Here, we'll write
and
you."
Maybe they did.
Write you this what for us is this minuscule check, and of course the Dredge guys are like, "How many zeros are after that?"
Name your price, Dredge people. I don't know.
$500.
Let's slap 2 more zeros on there. Call it good. Okay, sure.
So yeah, but it was a neat thing to see that kind of. The what you can imagine is mutual respect, or at least you hope.
Do you feel that, because again, Dave the Diver ended up being kind of the focus of a bit of controversy in terms of being labeled as an indie game. Do you think the attention it got was, this is bold, and this is unfair of me to ask of you, but do you think the attention it got was deserved? Like, do you think it was a good enough game on its own? Like, if it didn't have the Nexon money and was still able, for some reason, to do what it did, do you think that we would be talking about it, or at least the community would be talking about it as much as they did, or is it? Is it a game that is in the conversation just because Nexon was able to push it in front of literally?
Assuming that the game was similar to even without the Nexon backing, if it had been similar to what it is, Dredge was a much smaller game, but it still got a lot of conversation, right?
For sure.
I think Dave the Diver just it hit a lot more people. I think it got a lot more talk, and maybe it went a lot. It was they were able to develop things more effectively because they were able to take as long as they need, spend as much money as they need, whatever the case may be. But I think whatever, say what you will about its status as an indie game or not, say what you will about the size of Nexon. I think Dave the Diver clearly was something impressive in gaming, right? It was enough that people played it, people talk about it, and will be probably for a while, right? Because if they keep doing these little updates and stuff, right, it'll give people reason. I compare it with of games that hit and stay hitting, right? We've talked about No Man's Sky. I was thinking Stardew Valley, right? That actually,
Sure.
They have a new patch coming out sometime soon that's going to add new content. And there are people who are like, I'm ready to go play Stardew Valley again. I'm ready to drop another 100 hours in my farm in the valley, you know?
I think, people aren't coming to Dave the Diver or enjoying the Dave the Diver necessarily because of the mini game structure of it. I think people are talking about Dave the Diver because of its personality, its character, its writing, its visuals, its overall kind of package. And that's one thing that can't be denied, whether it's big money funded or not. Like it's a game with a very distinct voice and an appealing voice, with those cutscenes, with those characters, with the sort of retro / semi 3D kind of designs. It's its own thing, and just as Dredge is, I think it stands on its own 2 feet pretty well, whether it's quote unquote an indie game or not. I mean, maybe it's time to talk about, should we just get rid of the term indie game? Does that actually have any meaning anymore, especially in the light of this controversy? I don't know.
Who knows?
Dave the Diver, I recommend it. I'm not done with it, but I recommend it.
I joked that I don't know if I'm done with it either, but
it's not done with you for sure.
Well, and that's the weird thing about it. This is just a comment I've told you already, that like the idea that there's like this main story, and in fact, I got the achievement that says you got to the end of the game or whatever, right? But then after I got to the end of the game, I discovered new game mechanics.
Oh, really?
In running the restaurant, the sushi bar, and it's such a weird thing where you're like, wait, there was more to sushi? And part of it's because maybe I rushed the story too quickly. Because it's very easy to be like, oh, look, I'm doing the story. Oh, look, I'm at the end of the story, you know? But so that's weird. But other than that, I do recommend it. It's a fun time.
Or if you want to go OG fishing, go play Breath of the Wild. Nope. Breath of Fire. Is there fishing in Breath of the Wild? Probably.
I don't know.
I don't know. You can do everything in that game, apparently. No fishing in No Man's Sky, from what I can see. No, I guess technically you can. You basically Dave the Diver. You go down there and shoot shit. So if you, dear listeners, have your thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, specifically the places that we frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram at dbethelcomics, and you can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark@dice.camp.
While you're on our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube. There you'll find the show simulcast on YouTube. If you are listening to it on YouTube, please like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for the show. One is called Disco Medusi, the other is called District 4, both written and performed by Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms.
All right, Dan. It's a big year. It's 2024. I'm going to do a real quick update. Public domain for the year. This year's a banger. I know everyone wants to talk about their, Steamboat Willie. I've seen, several people say, here's my new cartoon. It's called Mickey the Fuck Rat or whatever. Like all sorts of, terrible. In fact, I think someone's announced a Mickey Mouse horror film.
Of course they have.
But the one
Mickey Mouse with Steamboat Willie meets Winnie the Pooh.
There's Steamboat Willie, the axe murderer. Anyway, but the one thing I actually do find really interesting is Weird Tales, right? Which is the old magazine that was like a literary magazine in that era.
You're being very generous. It's a pulp magazine.
It's a pulp magazine. It's a pulp magazine, but it's literary now. But the point is that they were releasing this shit every month. And if it wasn't already, a lot of the stuff was probably already public domain, but if it wasn't already, a lot of things are entering the public domain that are from these writers of that era. And there's some wild shits on that list. Like, it's not just, I mean, obviously we're going to mention Lovecraft, but Robert E. Howard, kind of, he wrote a lot in that era. There's people you'll see names like, oh wow, that guy wrote stuff, or that gal. But the one I want to mention, Lovecraft, several of his works came out in Weird Tales in 1924, 8.
Yep.
Four,
yeah.
Whatever you.
But a lot in the 20s.
But the one I want to mention, 1924, which means it's public domain, is the original story, The Call of Cthulhu. Now, while that story was probably already public domain, it is now 100% guaranteed public domain.
Right.
At least in its original publication. So,
original publication, because I know that S.T. Joshi, the Lovecraft academic, who's kind of led the charge on preserving and promoting Lovecraft. He's spearheaded many releases with restored text. I don't know if because basically he found the drafts that Lovecraft turned into Weird Tales, and then they cut a bunch of shit out. So I'm guessing, as you said, similarly with Steamboat Willie, doesn't mean necessarily Mickey Mouse is in public domain, just that version of Mickey Mouse is. That version of Call of Cthulhu is in public domain, although Lovecraft's status in terms of copyright is very bizarre, and who knows.
Right, it is very weird. So,
but have fun. You know what? Make Call of Cthulhu a romantic comedy. Let's go, because everything else they just make grim and gritty versions, like you said, with Winnie the Pooh, not non-Disney Winnie the Pooh, with Steamboat Willie. They're always talking about grim and gritty reboots. Let's flip the script here. Let's make Call of Cthulhu a charming meet cute between Sailor and Elder God, and
charming.
Let's just have that happen.
Oh my goodness!
So pitch us in the comments, dear listeners, what you're gonna do with the Call of Cthulhu, and then we'll make it happen. No, we won't, but we'd love to hear your thoughts at the very least. Anything else entering public domain that you've heard about, or is that the one that just kind of stood out to you most?
I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but that's the one I thought of.
Fair enough. So until you take Call of Cthulhu to new and exciting places, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
I want to write that theme song for that Meet Cute TV show.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. All right, let's talk about Day of the Diver.
Give me a clap.
How it's not really an indie game.
No, it's funny because while it might be a small team or whatever, like the company that publishes is far from indie. It's I
replaced the light bulbs in my ceiling fixture in my home office. Makes a world of difference. I was running off of it's a ceiling fan, has two slots for two bulbs. Mm-hmm. One had been dead. The other one was like one of those slow start, LEDs or fluorescents, I guess. Mm-hmm. It's like whenever you turn it on, only one to turn on, but it'd be really dim. I'm like, well, this is just life, apparently. Then I'm like, you know what? It's time to swap those out. It's like I've got a new lease on life. You just turn on the light and everything's bright. This is incredible. Absolutely incredible.